My Politics panel tonight. We have Melissa Tufanian with us, former senior State Department official, now managing director of Navigator Research, and Mark Bednar, former communications director to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican strategist. Good evening to you both. It is great to see you. Melissa, I'll start with you. We mentioned that there are certainly some important economic data that the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, will have to grapple with when he takes the seat, if you will, as chair. What do you think of what he has said until now and how he will navigate that role?
Well, I think he's going into an extremely complicated role given President Trump's relationship with the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, and also given the current economic situation. I think what we're seeing in our data is that Americans are really frustrated with the current economic situation. Many voted for President Trump because they wanted their costs to be lowered. They wanted inflation to come down. And with a year of President Trump at the helm, that's just not what they're getting. So I think he's going to be taking over this role with people really looking for a better economy, for lower prices, and for the current administration and for the Fed chair to take that seriously.
Mark, you know, President Trump was quite clear he wanted his guy in this role, and he's going to put Kevin Warsh under some pressure because he wants to see interest rates come down. But as Melissa was just saying, inflation has gone up. So this is going to be a tough job, isn't it, for Kevin Warsh?
Well, Kevin Warsh, during his confirmation process, he showed the Senate that he wanted the Fed to be independent. That being said, President Trump, of course, as we know, for 40 years has talked about how the Fed should lower rates to make it easier to borrow, make it easier to spend, make it easier for capital to come together. So both of these things are going to have to work together in some sort of symbiotic relationship. That being said, it's very important for the economy to actually turn a corner here and actually get back on track, because that's important for Republicans in the midterms. It's important for Americans buying goods day to day, and it's important for the president overall.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, Mark, and come to the point that President Trump made in front of the cameras yesterday, which has gotten quite a lot of attention, when he said he's not thinking about Americans' financial situation. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, was asked about this today, and he said, well, President Trump means he's thinking about Iran not getting a nuclear weapon, but of course we're thinking about Americans' financial situation. What do you think of this messaging?
Yeah, well, the vice president is absolutely right to clarify the full context. So when you're negotiating with a regime that has been killing Americans for almost 5 decades, making sure that they are defanged, making sure that they are unable to obtain and proliferate a nuclear weapon, that is key to the negotiations. That's the most important part of all of it. Unfortunately, and some would say, like, this is just a dynamic of, you know, the blessing that we have as a representative democracy, is that we have the asymmetry of having public opinion being a part of kind of our wartime effort. Iran or China or Russia, they don't have to deal with that because they're authoritarian countries. I'm not saying that that is an advantage or disadvantage. I'm just saying that that is a dynamic that comes into play with us. And so, of course, our population, our folks, they're going to have an opinion about the internal economic dynamics that occurred during wartime. And of course, the president does internalize that, but front and center is winning militarily. And of course, there are going to be benefits to that towards the American people, towards the world. We're going to be more safe, more secure, more prosperous in the long run because of President Trump's action in Iran.
Melissa, what do you think? You could see it in real time. Democrats clipping out that phrase there from President Trump when he said, I'm not thinking about Americans' financial situation. Do you think Americans actually believe that?
I mean, they might believe it in the sense it's hard to fathom that the president of the United States would say in any context that I'm not thinking about the personal financial situations of Americans. I mean, we hear from Americans in our focus groups that they're struggling with whether they're going to pay rent this month, or they're going to pay for healthcare, or they're going to pay for food. So people are facing really dire financial situations. We've found that, you know, more than half of Americans are staying home. They're not participating in the activities they normally would. They're taking on second and third jobs just trying to make ends meet. So to say that you are more focused on ensuring that Iran doesn't obtain a nuclear weapon, which I think we can all agree we don't want to see that happen, but to say that you're not at all worried about the financial situation of Americans is just startling to me.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
But that's also with the context is so important here. It's not that he's not in a vacuum, not concerned about Americans' financial situations. It's that when you're at the negotiating table, talking to the regime of Iran, of course, in that context, he wants to stare them down and make sure that Americans get the best deal possible. So it's not just to say that flippantly he doesn't care about the American people's financial situations. Of course he does. That's most of his legislative agenda. But in strict negotiations to win the war, to get a victory, that is President Trump's number one objective here.
Okay, so Mark, let me ask you this, because when President Trump is asked specifically about this war being unpopular and about those economic concerns, he says, well, look at the stock market. It doesn't seem that that's a message that will really resonate with most Americans who don't have a stake in the stock market.
Yeah, it's interesting. The president loves to talk about the stock market. Me personally, as a comms guy, I try to veer away from that. However, what's interesting is now that with Trump accounts, every child who's born between 2025 and 2028 now has a fresh start with a jump start with the activity in the stock market that they can access when they're 18. That being said, the stock market is a forward-looking mechanism. It's not backward-looking. So if the stock market is trudging along in a positive manner, that's something that the president can look towards. That being said, we know that energy markets, financial markets, what they need more than anything is certainty. They need a path, they need a runway. And so if President Trump can work towards a victory, towards a goal that we're actually fighting for, towards a resolution here that ends on a positive note for the American people, that's important for energy markets to signal to the whole world, hey, we can meet the production quotas that we're looking for, so that can stabilize markets and actually bring prices down, bring inflation down, and actually get this economy roaring again like it was right before this war started.
Melissa, Democrats keep calling war powers resolutions votes in Congress, trying to make sure that they have some say in this. And of course, in the Senate, a war powers resolution vote failed today. One more Republican senator joined Democrats. But what do you think the point of this is for Democrats? Because at the moment, this war is in a ceasefire, as the Trump administration has said.
Well, I think the point of a war powers resolution like we saw is to continually show, I believe this was the seventh one, to continually show that all but one Democrat in the Senate are opposed to this war, to continue to message to people that they do not agree with this chaotic, unnecessary, and severely costly war that Trump has chosen to put the United States into. And I think when we look at the stock market as an indicator of how the economy is doing, it's not an indicator for the majority of Americans who are struggling to get by, who continually say that they can't afford healthcare, that they can't afford basic necessities. It's a good indicator for big corporations, for millionaires and billionaires, but when it comes to everyday Americans who are really struggling, that doesn't capture the economic pain that they're feeling. So I would disagree that that's a good indicator, and I know Trump tends to look to that, but I think what we need to look to are the Americans who are telling us that they're really struggling. They don't want this war. They don't think Trump has an end game or a strategy here to get them out of it. And I think the fact that Trump is now in Beijing with the war looming over everything that he's doing is yet another indicator that he doesn't have an off-ramp, and that even though he may desperately be seeking one, that he's really struggling to end this war.
Mark, do you think we might see more Republicans join Democrats in these votes going forward?
Well, I wouldn't say that the three Republicans who joined Democrats in this most recent vote is a surprise to anybody.
Sure.
These are the same Republicans who also voted against One Big Beautiful Bill, the tax cut extensions that we saw last summer. So that shouldn't be really a surprise to anybody. What this really indicates that there's a tussle, there's a healthy tussle between the Congress and the presidency, Article 1, Article 2, that we've seen since the beginning of this country. And they should have that discussion. So where Congress, if they really wanted to curtail the presidency here, what they would do is not fund the war. However, of course, the Secretary Hegseth went before the committees in Congress today, and he said that this is the money that we need, and that they're going to end up funding it. So Congress can talk a big game when they say that they want to curtail the president's powers, but ultimately they're going to yield to his Article 2 authority, and President Trump, as I believe he should, be able to execute onto this military venture, this military war within his Article 2 authority.
Okay, Mark, Melissa, we've unfortunately run out of time, but thank you both for sharing your thoughts with us tonight.